Welcome to National Treasure Minute, where we analyze, scrutinize, and celebrate the 2004 film National Treasure, 1 minute at a time. So put on your ocular device and discover a podcast beyond all imagining. I am your co-host Charlie, and because this is the first episode, before we get into the meat of the minute, we're going to talk a little bit about first of all our backgrounds, and second of all kind of our history with this movie, why we're doing this. And then a little bit about the format, and then we'll get into the meat. So, like I said, my name is Charlie. I am a law school graduate, and I live in the southern United States. This movie has been a big part of my life. It's been a big part of my childhood. It was one of those movies that we watched over and over again. And we have quite a bit of history with this movie. Me and my co-host Matthew, we're brothers. So we had the same childhood, and we both, really enjoy this movie. It gets a lot of flack, It gets a lot of flack for, not being super plausible, first of all. And second of all, being PG oriented, which is atypical of your average adventure film. We'll get into more things like that, but I have a lot of reason to do this podcast, and that's about it.
Hey, and I'm Matthew. I am Charlie's younger brother. I am a PhD student currently in history, in English history, not American history. And I taught American history for 2 years in high school. So for all of my students out there, about 180 about 360 of them or so, they have all been subtly influenced by the history that's found in this film. And it's like as Charlie said, for him, it's also very similar for me. Like, this movie was probably one of the reasons why I got into history, or at the very least, it sort of sparked that passion that Ben Gates had. I wanted to be Ben Gates. I wanted to commit a grand larceny of something of intrinsic and historical value.
Yeah. So Indiana Jones makes everybody want to be an archaeologist, and this movie makes everybody want to be an historian.
Yeah, and that was probably my one of the two routes I could have gone when I went to grad school. I was actually thinking, like, okay, I could do archaeology, or I could do history. And if I wanted to do archaeology, I'd have to get permits and dig stuff up, and I thought, I don't want to do that. I just want to read books in an armchair. So I picked history.
So a little bit about how we're going to do this. I feel compelled to mention that we're getting this format from a different podcast called Star Wars Minute. It's a very famous podcast. It's one of those podcasts that really developed its own format that many other podcasts have picked up. And that format, of course, is analyzing a movie 1 minute at a time in minute by minute bits, and essentially picking apart every last detail that you can find, looking at the decisions that the director made, the music in that minute, the scenery, basically any production choice, just picking it apart and trying to figure out, why they did certain things and little things that you notice, little details they might have put in. And that's the whole format of these sort of podcasts, of minute by minute podcasts. Each time we're going to start out with where the minute started in the movie, and then where the minute ended, and then we'll just jump in and talk about what we noticed and different things that piqued our interest. So this minute begins with the logos, the production logos, Disney logo, Jerry Bruckheimer's logo, and it ends with a young Benjamin Gates stepping into his family attic. So what were your first impressions of this minute?
Well, the first thing I thought of was when I saw the Disney logo. It reminded me almost of like the Lion King. I think it has the same color scheme, the sort of orangish, yellowish hues. Mm-hmm. And then we move into the Jerry Bruckheimer logo with going down this long and winding road, and then there's a tree that gets hit by lightning, and somehow the lightning actually reverses the decaying tree or something. And then it moves into the attic. And so one of the first things that I thought about was how the logo itself seemed to be setting up the opening shot of the film, which is, of course, like a thunderstorm. And I thought that it was just really interesting because you don't really see that happen too often. It was, I think, accidental that Jerry Bruckheimer's logo happens to, mesh very, very cleanly with the thunderstorm. But it's, it doesn't happen that frequently. So I thought it was just really interesting that you have the thunderstorm of the Jerry Bruckheimer's logo and then the thunderstorm, and it's just one feeling that both of those two things evoke.
Yeah, well, you never know. It could be coincidental. It also could be intentional. It reminds me of Indiana Jones with the Paramount logo, in every single Indiana Jones movie. And we're going to make a lot of Indiana Jones comparisons because, this movie, I'm not going to call it derivative of Indiana Jones. It's definitely, it's set apart in tone and in direction and virtually everything except for being an adventure film. Regardless, it's still comparable to Indiana Jones. In this particular way, the idea of the opening logo somehow matching with the beginning of the movie, it definitely, it could even be a, some kind of reference. Whether it is or it isn't, that's really for Jerry Bruckheimer to answer. But the Indiana Jones movies all open up with the Paramount logo dissolving into some kind of mountainous feature on screen. So the fact that, Jerry Bruckheimer's logo involves a lightning bolt, and then, the first thing we hear is a storm brewing off in the distance, could very well be intentional.
Well, I think the film actually invites us to make those connections to Indiana Jones. I remember when all the promotional stuff was coming out, and when you first read the reviews online, I wasn't really browsing the internet like that in 2004, but, looking back on it, I think a lot of people made the connection to Indiana Jones, and I don't know. I think it's at least plausible.
What you should really make a connection to is Tomb Raider, Alan Quatermain, etc.
What is that?
Well, Alan Quatermain is predecessor to Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And then Tomb Raider is far more derivative of Indiana Jones than National Treasure is.
So what did you think about starting off the movie in an attic?
Yeah, so my thought on that is basically we're going to learn during the course of this movie, no spoilers of course, that Nicolas Cage is his character, Benjamin Gates, is an historian. And that's like his whole character is that he loves history. He's a history buff. He knows everything about history. There's references to how much he knows about history. It's a huge part of his character that he loves learning about the past and where he came from. So having, this almost like an origin story of him going into his family attic, and we see, all different kinds of things that his family's accumulated over the years. Having him, go through this pile of history, basically, it's a good way of like setting up his character, his personality of like absolutely, having this incredible academic interest in where he came from.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's interesting, right, that this really is a movie sort of glorifying a historian. If Indiana Jones is asking the question like, what would an adventure hero who's an archaeologist look like? This is, I think, asking the similar question of what would it look like if a historian was an action hero. And so him starting out in an attic where he's just, you just see this great mess of things, but it's a mess of things that really just, you want to know more about each specific thing. Like on one side, there's a wooden ship. There's on the other, like a map or like some papers scattered around. And then there's like a porcelain vase in the background. And it reminded me of in Last Crusade, where when Indiana Jones got the package from Venice and he's sitting down in his office and he's just got like so much stuff from like South America and Africa and Asia, where you can just tell that he's been on so many different adventures and that he's encountered so much history that he just loves it. And so if you're going to try to start a film about a historian, it makes a lot of sense to open the film where it's him as a boy encountering all of this history, or he's just grown up in an attic where there's just all of this stuff that he can look at. So I thought it was like it's a really interesting design choice of really solving a problem, which is how do you get across to the audience that this guy is going to become a historian?
Right. Yeah, and I mean we're going to get more into that in the next minute. This, like I said, this minute is literally just the logos and then young Ben Gates walking into the attic. There's really not too much more than that. It ends with actually young Ben Gates shining the flashlight towards the camera. In the next couple of minutes, we're gonna get a little bit deeper into his curiosity with respect to the past. Trying to think if there was anything I noticed in particular. There was what I did notice something that was a little interesting was there was like an animal squeal at some point.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was a rat or something, but it was just kind of interesting that they had a live animal in their attic. Maybe it was outside of the attic. I guess I don't know, but I don't know.
I guess that's sort of a design choice, really. When you think about an attic, you think about little rodents and creatures and creepy crawlies.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's true. It just kind of sets the atmosphere, I guess.
yeah. Well, so was there a specific thing in the attic that caught your attention other than the squeal? Like out of all the knickknacks and stuff.
Um, yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned the sailboat. That's really what I thought about too. I'm sure there might be, little things to look at. I didn't pay too close attention to that, but there might be other little things to look at. The sailboat makes me think that, there. It makes me think that potentially there was some kind of connection between the Gates family and maybe like some kind of naval incident.
The Charlotte.
Yeah, yeah, the Charlotte. Yeah,
Well, what that's I was just thinking, like, what if that's a replica of the Charlotte, and then Benny Gates was like, oh, this was a boat.
Oh, yeah.
Presumably, it's not hidden knowledge
Right.
that it was a boat. I mean, that there was a captain and crew
Right.
and stuff, so there would have been records.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, I think, a mystery that the Charlotte's a boat. The mystery was, what does Charlotte refer to,
Right.
or who does Charlotte refer
Yeah.
to? So maybe that was a replica of the Charlotte. We don't know.
No, that's actually a good theory. I didn't think about that. That's the second thing you pointed out that I didn't notice, like the lightning bolt thing too.
So I was also thinking that when we think about Star Wars Minute and how you can sort of get away with making a podcast that just goes minute at a time, it's because like people love to theorize about Star Wars. They want to pour over every single detail. They want to know more about how the movie was made, and also like what was George Lucas thinking, and what were the editors and the sound. So they want to know all of that. And it was interesting to me is that people, like, there's a very devoted fan base to National Treasure.
There is.
That I think actually would, that I think actually would be interested in like theorizing in a similar way to Star Wars. I mean, it doesn't have the same sort of following, but it does have a very, very intense but sort of tiny fan base around this film.
I'm absolutely gonna post this on r/declaration memes whenever we finish it. So I'm just gonna give a little brief shout out. That's one of my favorite subreddits. They're all just memes
Yeah.
about Nick Cage stealing the Declaration of Independence. But regardless, it's one of my favorite jokes. So
Yeah. Well, like I was watching the film recently, so in sort of preparation for the podcast, I started to watch it with my wife. What I was doing the whole time is I was thinking, like, when he said something, that how would Reddit make a meme out of this? How would
exactly.
like when he says it must have taken a long time to find out that history. I was like, that has to be a meme. Someone has got to say that.
There are people who like take movies and go line by line and make a meme about every single line in the movie. There's a guy who does it on the Raimi meme subreddit.
Oh yeah.
So somebody, this is a notice to the Declaration meme subreddit. Somebody needs to go line by line through this movie and make a meme about every single line. It's easy. Like every single line Nick Cage has, it's potentially meme material.
Yeah, it's like a red line version of the of the film. But I was also thinking that that's sort of the exact same thing what we're doing with the podcast, where we take it minute by minute. It's just in some sense, you might say this is crazy, to do this, but of course there's one thing less than crazy, making a podcast minute by minute, and that's just insanely passionate.
Yeah. No, we're gonna probably quote this movie like just different parts of the movie in the minute that we're actually on. We're gonna be doing that constantly, because my brother and I have this thing where we basically know this movie like the back of our hands. We know every single line. So it'll be maybe it's anywhere between annoying and endearing, but we probably will end up doing that. So back to the minute. Is there anything else that any like additional thoughts on the sheer act of young Benjamin Gate climbing into the attic and shining a flashlight?
I thought it was an interesting choice to start with, like the young version of somebody, and then they get older. I mean, that you see that all the time in like literature and poetry, and especially movies. I remember I was reading about Hannibal, not Lecter, but the Carthaginian general. And one of the great stories about Hannibal was that, it begins with him as a boy swearing an oath to never befriend the Romans. And then it moves into him leading the Carthaginians in the Second Punic War. And I thought, like, okay, that's a really interesting way of saying that there's something so unbelievably important about this person's life in this moment when they're a kid. And for Hannibal, that was never befriending the Romans. And then for Ben Gates, it's the story. It's the legend. And like that's why we're starting with the kid, is because the movie is telling us that this is about a man, and it's about his family. It's about one guy. He's really the only character that has, at least him and his father, the only characters that have like an actual arc in the movie. Everybody else is pretty static. I mean, maybe Abigail.
The takeaway from this episode is that Nick Cage is basically Hannibal, and he's got the same historical weight, and his origin story is just as compelling.
Hannibal against Rome.
We could even say Jesus.
Oh yeah, probably.
We could even say Jesus, because we have the story of Mary and Joseph finding young Jesus in the temple, and young Jesus saying, that he must be in his Father's house. So, in the same way, young Ben Gates has said, I'm in the attic, ergo I'm going to be an historian.
Yes. Well, he has to go to the temple, right? He has to go to Parkington Lane or beneath it. Obviously, this is a Christ story. I mean, this is a messianic story.
It is. I'm going to test and see how many different biblical connections we can find in this movie. We won't find too many, other than when they're explicit, like King Solomon's temple. Beyond that, let's see if we can.
The winding staircase.
Let's see if we can do the obligatory biblical comparison of the hero and the hero's journey, even where it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So one other thing I want to talk about was the title "National Treasure," because I don't know how many of you know this, but the term "national treasure" is a legitimate term in the study of culture and the study of history. It refers basically to the cultural material out of which a given country forms its national identity. You have, like, for instance, the Matter of Britain, which are basically legends associated with the founding of the British people. The same thing with the Matter of France, which is about basically Charlemagne founding the modern society of France, the modern country of France. And this movie kind of makes homage to that, but in an American way. It refers to the mythology of the founding fathers and the ideals the founding fathers fought for. They certainly did have ideals, but this movie confronts that in a very quasi-mythological way. And especially with the Declaration and the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall and all these important events that it kind of portray like America's understanding of itself in these really material things. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a fair point, but now I'm hearing that not only is Nick Cage, is he Christ, now he's also King Arthur, and he's Charlemagne, and he's Hannibal. So Nick Cage, I mean, he's a very he's a very good actor. He can play many different roles. I didn't realize he could do all of them at once. That's the sign of a true new Peter O'Toole, a new Laurence Olivier on our hands.
Yeah. And the thing about Nick Cage is that he like this movie, he gets a lot of flack himself. There's a lot of people who don't think Nick Cage is a very good actor, and that's basically because he has a very dramatic style of acting. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. I think he's a great actor.
Yeah, and actually, even the guy who plays young Ben Gates, I mean, he doesn't have really too many lines. We haven't even got to a single line yet in the film. That's just his first minute. But I think this kid does a fantastic job. I mean, he just... Yeah. Like, it's because it's really easy for child actors to overact. Yeah. Or because they just don't have as much control, I guess, right, as a seasoned actor. But I think Matt Gomez does a fantastic job. And Nick Cage, you're right, he does get a lot of flack, but I think this is one of his better roles.
Yeah. He was perfect for this movie. And I guess people, would say this about, Indiana Jones too. Like, I can't imagine Ben Gates as anybody other than Nick Cage in the same way that I can't imagine Indiana Jones as anybody other than Harrison Ford. I think it was excellent casting, but we'll get to that whenever we actually see Nick Cage.
Yeah, when we see your boy Nick Cage. But I was actually thinking because there's some people that do this now where they say, all right, if this movie was made today, who would get cast in these different roles? Like there's a guy on YouTube that does, like, he did Lord of the Rings, and he cast different people in the different roles. Like I think he cast that guy, who is it, James McAvoy. He cast him as a new... He played Charles Xavier in the new X-Men films, where he's the young Charles Xavier. Uh-huh. He cast him as Frodo. But I was thinking, like, who would I cast as a new Ben Gates? And I honestly, like, I don't know.
I don't know either. I was thinking, like, if we're going with, well, I guess I don't know, like another actor that is known for having these like insane versatility when it comes to the roles he takes. A lot of actors just get typecasted. Nick Cage doesn't get typecasted. He plays any kind of character he wants to play. He was a sorcerer in The Sorcerer's Apprentice, in that god awful movie.
Yeah. I haven't actually even seen Wicker Man or anything like that. I think the only other movie I really liked him in, which is going to get a lot of flack, was the was it The Conjuring? No, the something Gerund.
Yeah.
What is it?
I'm trying to think of what that was. Let me. Oh, The Knowing.
Is it that?
The Knowing.
The
yeah.
Knowing. That's
yeah,
it. The
yeah,
Knowing.
Yeah.
There's always
Yeah.
that something Ing film, and that's him. Yeah, I don't know, because like the thing is, if you were to try to cast him now, right? You don't want to pick a guy like Chris Pine or Chris Pratt or Chris Hemsworth, like all these like really sort of like attractive like Marvel guys, or these like A-list actors. Like, not to say Nick Cage isn't like that, but it's just to say that he's not traditionally handsome.
Nick Cage is a handsome
guy.
Yeah. I'm gonna defend Nick Cage till my dying breath in this podcast. Of course, I don't think you're gonna put up too much of an assault, but I'm gonna do it regardless.
Yeah. Well, he's not. I wouldn't say he's traditionally handsome, but maybe more handsome than myself. So who am I to critique him? So give credit where credit's due.
And here's what I'm gonna say: if we get through all 240 minutes of both of these movies, National Treasure 1 and National Treasure 2, I'm gonna vote that we do The Knowing afterwards, and then we'll just Nick Cage movies.
Yeah, this just turns into the Nick Cage minute.
Yeah,
we have to do his entire filmography.
Yeah, and that's going to be our first title. We're going to call this one Episode 1, the Nick Cage minute. So
the Nick Cage minute.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good place to end this off. I think we had a good first episode, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for listening.